Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here so early in the morning. I have a tripod of concepts to talk about. These concepts are three couples, as I said: social innovation, cultural innovation, and religious innovation. Let me say a few words to begin with. Social innovation aims to address unmet social needs in new ways by developing or enhancing new products and services through the direct engagement of the people who need and use them, typically through a bottom-up process. Cultural innovation sounds like an oxymoron. It is not, though. It is something real that tops up social and technological innovation. How can we measure cultural innovation? The answer is as a result of co-creation. Items of cultural innovation are content providers such as museums, science centers and libraries, and the second kind of items, processes, triggered by issues such as cosmopolitanism, inclusiveness, mobility, migration, heritage and creativity. Religious innovation, finally, is a result of the dynamic texture of religious communities and traditions, as well as of the contextuality of social, cultural, and technological innovations, thus avoiding reductive definitions of either religion or innovation. Following an action research approach, the Institute of Religious Studies of Fondazione Bruno Kessler in Trento focuses on the role of religious innovation in processes of social change. I'm very much acquainted with this institute. The objective of this paper is to develop and test a methodology to measure the impact of technology transfer from basic research to industry application and its cultural and socio-economic effects. Now, what is cultural innovation? This is, I already said in the abstract, it's content providers, content, common goods, and processes. Processes are reflection, which is an individual process, and inclusion, which is a social process. How do we measure it? As I said, a specific innovation can no longer be seen as a result of predefined and isolated innovation activities, but rather as the outcome of a complex co-creation process involving knowledge flows across the entire economic and social environment. In fact, we do not have an accepted methodology. It's all very new. Why do we want to measure it? Because we want to improve societal acceptance of public investment of culture. This is the famous issue, why do we have ministries of culture? Measurement may provide a basis for aligning research and innovation with the values, the needs, and expectations of society. So this is a methodological paper about how to measure cultural innovation. Now, co-creation. Well, co-creation is a contrary of co-creation is the joint creation of value by the company and the customer, allowing the customer to co-construct the service experience to suit their context. Now, this is something that happens already in many cases. We are talking about open innovation, which is a contrary of closed innovation. Closed innovation is Microsoft. Open innovation, if you want, is Netflix, because you tell Netflix every time what you want. This argument has 5 parts: context, innovation economics, research infrastructures, indicators, reflexivity, and religious innovation. Now, the part of research infrastructures is, I hope, interesting for you because it's very new too. Context. Well, we know globalization has made it clear that the most urgent objective is to work out policies of social and cultural innovation to the advantage of citizens. Policies that aim at achieving changes in the regulatory environment that make societies both inclusive and reflective. We have a UNESCO declaration, which is very important. I hope you remember it. It's a Faro Convention on the Value of Cultural Heritage for Society. This framework convention encourages reflection on the role of citizens in the process of defining, creating and managing a cultural environment in which communities evolve. It is now time to examine the implications of innovation for redefining the ways in which the humanities have been envisioned, particularly to visualize the various ways in which they engage with cultural processes in the past, present and future. So this is about the role of the humanities. Cultural innovation is typical of the humanities. It corresponds, if you look at it, to ERC panels SH5, which is culture, and SH6, which is history. Now, this is I had already in the abstract, so I can skip it. And let's talk about this declaration. Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa is the President of the Republic of Portugal. He made it clear in the concluding remarks he gave in 2017 that social innovation is the backbone of all European research policies. So this is something that we are very proud of. Europe puts a lot of money in research on social innovation. Now, social innovation is a big concept, and we can be concrete when we talk about social innovation, because if you see in the middle of this long quote by Romano Prodi, you will find so ungefähr 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines, 11 lines. Prodi says we have social infrastructures. Social infrastructures are education, lifelong learning, health, long-term care, so for the aging society, social care, and affordable housing. These are social infrastructures: education, health, housing. And social innovation is about making investment in these infrastructures more effective and more empowering, because whatever investments we put in social innovation has a result which can be measured and goes towards empowering. So this is social innovation. But if we look at the cultural innovation, on one side you will say machines have helped making cultural studies more effective. So culture too needs innovation, and in fact produces innovation. Museum studies foster innovation in museography. Archaeology fosters innovation in data science that becomes data humanities. Archaeology has relied very heavily on computer graphics and databases. Music and art foster innovation through social networks. Technology adds economic value in the heritage sector. Digitized cultural material can be used to enhance the visitor experience, develop educational content, documentaries, tourism applications, and even games. So this is something we have seen. So we can say heritage-led innovation means that culture requires technological innovation. We put questions, and the ICT people solve them. But we can look at it the other way around. Cultural innovation is not simply machines for better museums or for better archaeology or for better music. Cultural innovation is something that brings society forward. So what part of social innovation is cultural innovation, and what rights can cultural innovation claim with respect to society? Answer: European cultural heritage marks, this is a paper for Europe, but it's global cultural heritage. Global cultural heritage marks one's country identity, which is at the same time diversity. To assess cultural innovation as a value-sensitive integration of technological and social innovation is a great challenge that contemporary science and technology studies are confronted with, and we need to look at it more closely. So this is a paper actually in science and technology studies, not in philosophy. Now, why do we look at it? Well, because we talk to people. We don't talk to scholars. Culture talks to people. Science talks to scholars. So we're talking culture. And obviously, the public is not made of scientists, it's made of people. And people have experienced the fragility of experiential knowledge, i.e., a knowledge that is not scientific but is rational and robust and is produced through lay people experiences and activities. Such knowledge is, however, fragile because it is not supported by the kind of institutional framework which works quite well in the case of scientific knowledge. So you believe me because I'm a professor. If I were to tell you something about the monument, you ought to believe me because apparently I know something about this document, but there is no documentation. We also acknowledge distributive unfairness in connection with epistemic goods, such as knowledge, education, and communication, and we call this epistemic injustice. You heard it yesterday by Professor Legenhausen about epistemic indifferentism. I'm speaking here about epistemic injustice. Not everybody has had access to all the content which is available. In some, fair and unfair epistemic practices of co-creation, by elaborating on the practice of giving and taking reasons, play a role in the responsible co-creation of knowledge, which is what cultural innovation is about. Now let me tell you that we have in Europe something really very interesting, which are research infrastructures. Now, research infrastructures are common goods, so they are open science, open data, open science. They are planned, built, and managed for serving vast research communities which operate in diversified sectors on the principle of open access and competition. Now, there is a working group within the Research Infrastructures Strategy Forum, which is the one that decides where to put the money to develop research infrastructure, which is called Social and Cultural Innovation Strategy Working Group. Helps tackle the grand challenges facing society. So it's about health, demographic change, inclusive, innovative, and reflective societies. It establishes the methods through which social science and humanities could be used as an evaluation criterion for the activity of our research infrastructure. It also explores how research infrastructures can contribute to social innovation or better knowledge transfer towards society. Now, these are the research infrastructures we have now. It's for the humanities. It's 6. You see, the first one is Clarin. It's about linguistics. It's aligned corpora. The second one is Daria, research infrastructure for the arts and the humanities. So look, the Institute of Humanities and Cultural Studies in Iran ought to be a partner of the digital research infrastructure for humanities and arts in the European Union. That's what caters to you. We have a research infrastructure on the Holocaust, which is always for putting together documents. We have a research infrastructure on heritage science for conservation and analysis of monuments. We have a research infrastructure on open access publishing, and we have a research infrastructure for religious studies. Look at it, the last one. Research infrastructure on religious studies collects historical documents and current information on global theological political issues while fostering interfaith dialogue. This is very recent, and it's really a beautiful stuff. I am in several boards of these infrastructures. I can tell you it's very, very passionate. And this is a great contribution Europe gives to the world. It's not only European, and it's open, so we are looking for partners. Now, if we want, I try to go a bit faster on the issue of the indicators. So, if we want to measure cultural innovation, we have to look at 4 items. The first item is institutional change. You know about libraries. Since technological changes come about, the regulation of the library has changed. It's not only about books, it's about services, about downloading books. So this is something which is very easy to measure, and in fact it's the first indicator. The second indicator is participation. That is, we want open innovation means there are groups that participate. Not everybody wants to participate, but suppose we want to collect ourselves and study something particular that we can do well, like women philosophers. We have a great working group about women philosophers in the history of philosophy. That's something that brings together a group and uses open science data for providing open innovation, that is, for providing new services, new contents, new processes, which were not there. So participation is the second item. Third item is access. How much access are we granted? We would like to know everything, but we can't. So how come that we know to a certain level? We would like to be admin, but obviously we can't. So how much do we get? This is also not obvious. So we have to measure it. And the third indicator is user data. We download the data. We download movies. We download books. We download pictures, and actually the system knows we have done that. This in China is already the case. The government knows about everything, about everybody, what they do, because of the data flows. We are not there so far in Europe, but the new laws of the copyright goes in the direction, because we have to streamline this. So cultural innovation is also about managing user flows. And let me point out that you could please go and look at Daria Eric. Daria, like Darius, the Persian emperor, only the feminine way. Daria Eric. So digital research infrastructure, arts and humanities. It offers the possibility to establish communities of practice, like working groups, which produce exactly co-creation, because they are together, they use data and they produce new data, and they get together from different institutions at different seniority levels. I'm talking about European institutions because it's a European-wide network, but it could be open, and they are run voluntarily, so it's not institutional, it's creation. And let me talk about reflexivity. Well, reflexivity was the result of a compromise that came about in 2013, when the European Union eventually opened European money for philosophy, and so people asked them, we want our society to be reflective. First reflective, second inclusive. And this is Habermas plays the crucial role of deliberative communication of citizens in a modern public sphere aimed at mutual understanding. And obviously Habermas has applied to society what Hegel had elaborated as a passage from the surface of being to the ground of essence, so from the how to the why. A passage that takes place literally by reflecting into the thing, like reflected light that illuminates something previously invisible or creates patterns not previously existing. Now, globalization is not a new experience. It is a long-term historical process that enhances regional, national, and local identity. Cultural identity, however, is polysemic, slippery, and illusory. In fact, culture cannot be but plural, changing, adaptable, constructor. A culture that does not change and exchange with our culture is a dead culture. Cultural identity is therefore what we construct whenever we are in contact with other human beings, regardless of the fact that they are from the same environment or not. So reflexivity is about diversity. I have here a case study. Well, I have 5 minutes left. So look at this example. We have a second-generation Chinese-Italian boy or girl who attends a human science high school in Italy. At a certain point, she might be asked to read a text by Plato, possibly the Apology of Socrates, in Italian, than perhaps in the Greek original or in the classic Latin rendering of Marsilius Ficinius. Second generation Chinese are very smart. The student ought to read the same text in modern unified Chinese as well, so that she might be able to start a discussion on Socrates in its Chinese-speaking family. Inversely, schoolmates might appropriate Confucius' Analects through the conceptual references indicated by the student. Together, they might start a discussion on Dong, Jing, Ranji, Ren, and eventually come to grasp some key tenets of Neo-Confucianism, such as the dictum restoring the heavenly principle and diminishing human desires. Students today delve easily into multi-layered, multilingual hypertext, which is open data, open science, and they do so on the basis of the reciprocal guidance made possible by social reading groups, so participation groups. So this is what happens already. Data science is used for open innovation. And why do we want to do this? Well, we want to improve societal acceptance of public investment in culture. And in fact, we now have the new framework program for research and innovation for 2021-2027, which is called Horizon Europe, and is focused on missions, that is, on answers to the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 United Nations Agenda. And what we want to achieve is a change in the mindset. So cultural innovation is about changing the mindset. Urban development, urban regeneration, institutional change. I like culture as a way of obtaining ratings. We will do it by considering inclusion. So in this sense, Europe becomes Confucian, if you want. We don't want exclusion, we want inclusion. And let me conclude by pointing out what we are doing in Trento. In the Fondazione Bruno Kessler, we have this Institute of Religious Studies, which dedicates attention to the texture of religious communities and tradition, as well as to the contextuality of social, culture, and technological innovation, thus avoiding reductive definitions of either religion or innovation. The center focuses on the role of digital technologies in processes of social change. It explores the potential of technology-assisted and technology-enabled social innovation in collaboration with researchers in information and communication technology. So, what do they do in Trento? It's a small group, but they are very much in collaboration with ICT and computational social science, and they analyze phenomena of religious innovation when they find that groups strive for recognition, for institutional recognition, which is the first group of indicators, and they do so by providing access to cultural common goods. And the cultural common goods in case of religious innovation is churches, monuments, documents, sites, graveyards, everything that can be recorded. And actually these people use their phones to gather data, and out of what they use, what they find by using their phones are able to reproduce them and to share them. And third item, they create communities of practice. We want to look at the concept of God in Abrahamic monotheism, and we create a community of practice for that. And finally, they leave traces. So they have user data to look at. And let me conclude by quoting our friend Remy Brague, who noted that Camus dictionary is an Arabic term which is a translation of Okeanos. And Okeanos is a titan, but is also the ocean, the liquid extension that embraces all emerged lands, permitting navigation and hence communication. Leibniz has talked about ocean for an encyclopedia, which is the very same idea concerning languages, that we thought when we look into when we talk about social innovation. And Jaspers pointed out the axial age. Confucius, Lao Tzu lived and taught in China. The Upanishads were produced in India, where Buddha lived, Zarathustra in Persia, the prophets in Palestine, Homer, Parmenides, Heraclitus, and Plato in Greece. Everything implied by these names developed almost simultaneously in China, India, and the West. Today we see the rebirth of the cultural melting pot that Plato spoke about in Timaeus 23c, thus prefiguring the translation of Greek words, culture and thought into the Latin words of Cicero and Boetius, or the dynamics of the great Mediterranean cultural circle made of translation and tradition of philosophical, religious, and medical texts from Greek and Hebrew into Arabic, Latin, and all vernacular languages. So this is a mission of the institute that Tullio Gregory founded and which I had the honor of directing in these years. And we think that by using data, open data, for producing new services, new ways of accessing, new ways of putting up groups, and new ways of coming into the education of individual people, we can trigger reflection that will end up in improvement. Thank you very much.